Welcome back everyone. Today, world number 3, Hikaru Nakamura defeated world champion Ding Liren in round 5 of Norway chess. And I'm going to explain 3 key lessons from the game to help you improve your chess. So for those who don't know me, my name's Philip. I'm a 2100 ELO rated player from New Zealand down at the bottom of the map. And so let's crack into it. So Norway chess is one of the strongest chess tournaments in the calendar. And in this particular game, this is a classical time control game, and Ding had white and Hikaru had black. Ding played the Queen's Gambit, and Hikaru countered with, or reciprocated, I should say, with a Queen's Gambit of his own, just with c5. In these types of positions, if we go back, when both sides push their D and C pawns to the middle, usually you can end up with an isolated D pawn either for white or for black. In this case, the players decided to trade all the pawns off and a pair of knights as well. And we ended up with this position here, where white has a queen on c3 and the D and C pawns are traded for both sides. So this is the first key point we want to go over, which is in these types of positions where the D and C pawns have been traded away in a Queen's Gambit type setup or opening. What you want to do is you have to play for piece activity, because the pawn structure, even though it's symmetrical, there's no weaknesses, there's nothing to play for in a symmetrical pawn structure when it comes to pawn breaks, typically. So piece activity becomes really key, and it's you'll see exactly where Hikaru's masterful play got him the advantage over here. So e4 by Ding. As you can see, both Ding and Hikaru have to get their kings to safety by castling. So Ding opens lines for his bishop to come out and threatening an annoying pin by moving the bishop to b5. So Hikaru simply sidesteps that with a6, bishop e2, and e5 by Hikaru. That is not a free pawn, by the way, because if white takes it, now the bishop's open and black wins the white queen. So instead of taking there, Ding plays a3, bishop g4, castle, rook c8, setting up an annoying potential discovered set of moves with knight d4, etc. on the queen. So Ding gets his queen off that c-file. And one key thing just to watch out for here, for those, when we're talking about piece activity being key, let's play a couple more moves and you'll see how many times white moves his queen. So white was threatening the b7 pawn. This is a very thematic move, knight to a5 when your pawn is on a6. It allows you to meet queen a5, queen a4 check with b5, because the pawn supports b5 and the queen supports the knight on a5, and Ding moves his queen back. So this is move 14 by white, and within 14 moves white has played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moves with his queen. So this is where Ding starts going a little bit backwards, because after the queens are traded off, black ends up with a slightly better piece activity, because after his next move, knight b3, he clamps down white's queenside and really restricts white's ability to get his queenside pieces out. And once Hikaru gets his king to safety and his bishop out, he will have no issues and he will have slightly better piece activity, which again, by no means does it mean Hikaru would be winning, but it means he has a slight advantage. And here the computer says negative 0.3 in favor of Hikaru. Rook b1, bishop c5. This pawn still can't be taken because the bishop is hanging, so king f1 is played, and f6 by Hikaru, solidifying that center and preventing the knight from coming to g5 after rook d3, bishop e6, and not exactly here because black has moves like bishop c4, but just stopping the knight from kicking the bishop at any point. And really, we'll pause here and just take a look at the position. So how do we assess this position? Equal material, no queens, queenless middle game, white's king is safe, black's king isn't, so to speak, and black still needs to get his rook out. Outside of black's kingside rook, black has a space advantage on the queen side. He has a very annoying knight and very active knight on b3, restricting white from getting his rook out, and his bishop is always needing to spend some time. So again, it all comes down to timing as well. If white had 3 or 4 moves to play consecutively here, he could easily unravel his pieces, untangle them, but he doesn't. In this case, Ding, yeah, outside of that, this rook is purely defensive at the moment because it's just trying to put pressure on this knight, which is cramping up the position. This bishop's doing nothing really, and this knight has no real good prospects. So if you compare piece by piece, black's knight is stronger than white's knight. Black's light squared bishop is slightly better than white's light squared bishop. Black's queenside rook is better than white's queenside rook, and black's dark squared bishop is better than white's light squared bishop. The only question mark for black is when and how can he get that kingside rook into play. So Ding tries to resolve one of his issues, or a couple of his issues, by playing knight d2. Now, again, piece activity is the lesson we're trying to instill here. So since black has an active knight, white tries to trade it off. The problem with this is Hikaru simply moves the knight to a really strong outpost on d4, where it just continues to be a thorn in white's side. Now, let's compare that. For instance, a lot of less experienced club players might, in this position, do something like knight takes here. Unfortunately, that not only trades off black's better knight on b3 for the weaker white knight on d2, but it also allows white to get his bishop out with the same move. So black here starts losing his advantage. So you always want to watch out. You don't play moves that just directly play into the opponent's plan of how he would be unraveling his side. By leaving that knight on b2, white still needs to move that knight to get that bishop out in a lot of ways if he wants to get it out this way. If white wants to get it out onto b2, well, let's see what happens. One more thing before we continue. If black continued knight takes here, black does have the bishop pair, but again, there's no need for Hikaru to give up a little bit of his advantage because he's got a very strong knight while white has a very weak bishop currently, right? We're talking about, this is why piece activity is so important. Knight d4, b4, and just before we continue on, whenever you make a pawn move, you should look at which squares are you no longer able to defend ever again with a pawn. In this case, white has sacrificed or relinquished control permanently of the squares c4 and c3. And black has control of the c file. So let's see how that plays into the game. Here, Ding, oops, went far too far ahead. Let's go back a little bit. Okay. So here, Ding has a choice. Move this knight again and get the bishop out maybe onto e3, or get the bishop out to b2 but relinquish control of these two squares. Ding decides to go with the tempo move, which is b4 attacking the bishop, bishop b6, and then bishop b2. So now, this is another critical point to look at. White has managed to get most of his pieces out, and his next move is probably going to be something like rook c1, trading off black's strong rook, and just trading down pieces, because the less pieces that are on the board, in general, it should favor the side that's defending. Hikaru decides to take the bishop on c2, sorry, on e2, assessing that he's going to have much better chances with the bishop pair versus white's knight and dark squared bishop. King takes, king e7. Now the king stops the rook from infiltrating at any point, white's rook, and he can connect his rooks up on the back rank. f3, so Ding solidifies his position and gets that pawn off the f2 square, which is a target because the bishop was looking at it. Rook to c2. Now we move on to the second lesson we're trying to cover here, which is do not rush to find a win. Just continue to apply progressively more pressure when you have the advantage. Now, what does that mean and why is it important? In this case, let's take a step back. It's Hikaru's move here. He knows he's got the advantage. He's got more active pieces, but again, this is a extremely symmetrical position, pawn structure-wise. So how do you convert a slight advantage of piece activity into a win? Well, you do that by applying slightly more pressure every move as much as you can, tightening the screws, not letting the pressure dissipate. So you want to look out if your opponent's trying to trade off your active pieces, you want to avoid that as much as you can. Otherwise that gives your opponent drawing chances. So you want to tighten the screws, apply more pressure, and slowly, weaknesses will start to appear in the opponent's position. As you'll see, that's how Hikaru took advantage. So rook c2, possibly plans of doubling rooks on the c-file. Again, nothing immediately winning for black, but it's tightening the screws. Now it's getting this rook into the game. So Ding recognizes that and tries to trade off rooks instantly. And Hikaru plays bishop c4 check, king e1, bishop f2 check, and now if king takes, Hikaru will play rook takes, followed by doubling rooks here. Now, to be fair, this is still only a slight advantage and probably would have been a better thing for Ding to do, but Ding decided to play king to d1, which the computer doesn't like, and it allows Hikaru now, because he's forced to trade that rook off, allows Hikaru to get his last rook into the game, applying pressure on now white's king. And so now white's king does not look as safe as it once was. This rook, again, white just wants to trade rooks at this point. If white can trade rooks and protect his pawns, these three pawns are typically going to be the weakest right now because they're on their own. This rook can't easily swing across to guard them. This bishop can't either. This bishop's stuck on this square, essentially. And this knight can't really go anywhere. So this is what we mean by piece activity. White's pieces are so restricted, they've got minimal moves. Actually, this is an instructive point. Let's take a look. Where can white's pieces actually move? Well, this bishop can't go here. It can only go here or here. B2 or A1. Do either of those squares make the bishop better? No. Doesn't do anything. Okay. What about white's king? He can't go here or here. He can't go here either because bishop d3 skewer on the rook. So white's king can only go here. Does that improve white's position? Possibly, because he can go king b2 and then rook to d1 or something like that. But does it really improve the position? Not too much. Okay. Can this knight move? Well, not at the moment because it's pinned, but even if it could move, it can't go here, can't go here, can't go here. It's blocked by its own pawns. Can't go here. It can only go here. And to get to b3, it needs to have a reason why it's going to b3. So possibly white wants to play something like that down the line, but again, it doesn't really achieve anything for white. This rook, again, doesn't belong anywhere. there's no real good squares for it. Whereas let's take a look at black's position. This bishop is coming into f1 because that knight is pinned, applying pressure on this. That bishop can also apply pressure to this pawn. This bishop has space to come around here and apply pressure here. This bishop can apply pressure on the pinned piece here. The bishop can come here and trade, and possibly, once black takes with the e-pawn, get a passed pawn on d4. So black has a lot more mobility with his pieces. The king can come up this way, g6, f5, pushing pawns up the board, h5, g5. Black has very many active ideas, white doesn't. And that's what we mean by piece activity. Sometimes you can just really just look at it piece by piece. Where can my opponent's pieces go? Where can my pieces go? And you can see that your opponent or you or whoever is limited in options, and that's why in this case, even though it's equal material, it really is favoring black this position. Rook a1, again, Ding is just trying to activate that rook by playing a4, and after take, opening up the a file for his rook. He's trying to do something. It's not going to work, as you'll see. Bishop f1, g3, and now that's weakened this f3 square, or the f3 pawn. Bishop e3, a4, takes, bishop b5. Now, even if, let's just say, black played something like this, what black doesn't want to do is black doesn't want to take with the a pawn, because that now actually opens up the whole file rather, for the rook. So that is the reason why Hikaru's essentially created this structure, because now white doesn't have the open a file for his rook. Again, piece activity and applying more and more pressure. Okay, rook a1, rook d3. Again, does that win on the spot? No, but it applies more pressure, and that rook is protected by the bishop on b5, and he's applying pressure on f3 and the bishop here. Rook c1, h5. Now, here's another instructive moment. If you're Hikaru, or if you're black, you ask yourself, can I improve are there any immediate tactics? No? Okay. Can I easily improve any of my pieces to be in a slightly stronger position or square? The answer is not very obvious, but it's very hard to see how you'd improve any of your pieces' positions. They're all on very active squares right in your opponent's camp, and your opponent is just very much squeezed up in a corner, essentially. So what's the next step? Now you start looking for pawn breaks, because pawn breaks disrupt the opponent's pawn structure, create weaknesses in your opponent's pawn structure, and now your active pieces can start gobbling up pawns. So h5, king c2, takes, rook takes f3. So now we enter the third lesson territory, and also black has just won the f3 pawn. These pawns are always going to be weak for white. The h2 pawn is weak because black's always going to be able to easily apply pressure along this second rank with his rook, and the e4 pawn is able to be attacked by the light squared bishop and the rook, and white's dark squared bishop can never defend his own pawn. On the other hand, black's e5 pawn is defended by the f6 pawn. So now lesson number 3 is around opposite colored bishop endgames with rooks favor the side that is attacking. If we were purely to look at this as a opposite colored bishop's endgame where the rooks weren't on the board, then it's going to be really hard for black to win. Opposite colored bishops endgames are usually drawn unless the attacking side has 2 or possibly even 3 pawns up and even then it really depends on the position, but a lot of the time even having a pawn up is not enough to win, simply because your opponent can create a blockade on the opposite color complex that you can't shake that bishop and king blockade off because your bishop attacks a different color complex. But with rooks on the board, you can see how black's going to be able to continue to apply pressure, and white's not going to be able to defend on the light squares, whereas black's going to be able to attack on the light squares. So bishop c6, applying pressure to e4, rook e3, trying to trade the rooks off. Hikaru is not dumb though, so he plays rook f2, h4, bishop a4, a little bit of maneuvering here, attacking the g3 pawn, rook e3, g6, a bit more maneuvering, g5, and here comes the pawn break. Black is going to either take on here and create a weakness on h4 to attack alongside the weakness on e4, or white's going to take, let's just play it out, and then after something like this, black is going to be able to create a passed pawn that can easily go up the board, and black wins that way. Which option did Ding go for? He went for bishop d2, now threatening to actually win the pawn. So Hikaru took, check, bishop e2, rook h2, not yet threatening to win because the bishop would be hanging, but nonetheless keeping an eye on that pawn. Bishop c5, and after a few more moves, or rather after bishop b5 here, Ding resigned because this pawn is going to fall in the next move or two. This pawn is constantly going to become going to stay a weakness, and black is just going to march that h pawn up. And so that's the game, beautifully played by Hikaru. And the lessons we can learn are, even in symmetrical positions, or especially in symmetrical positions, piece activity counts for a lot. Because by nature, there's not much you can do with the pawn structure at that early stage of the game. So you want to maximize your piece activity, tighten the screws, apply more and more pressure, create a pawn break at the most opportune moment when you've maximized your piece activity by putting your pieces on their best squares. And then once you've done a pawn break, you create weaknesses in the pawn structure, you attack those weaknesses, you win a pawn, you win a second pawn, you win the game. Hope you guys enjoyed that video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.